Why discipline? Let me tell you, success normally doesn't happen overnight. In fact, the people who seem to be able to pull off any kind of success in a very short period of time have actually paid their dues. That's right. They weren't born that way. They had to go through a long process of disappointment, failure, and yes, pain. If you see a lot of winners around you, it's because they put in the time. The good news is, you can do the same. Discipline is not just about achieving your goals. It's also about becoming a better person. Because let's face it, if given a choice, we'd rather do things that are pleasurable, quick and easy right here, right now. Unfortunately, life reserves the biggest rewards to people who would rather wait until they eat their cookie. If you develop that skill as a little child, you will be able to become a very successful person indeed. In fact, in a long-term study conducted in the United States, children who were able to delay gratification by foregoing eating a cookie now, in exchange for a promise of eating 2 cookies in the future, turned out to achieve higher levels of career, personal and health success. Discipline is closely related to how well you do in life. This is not something that you pick up to solve some sort of problem, and then promptly drop. Instead, this is a key part of you that you need to invest a proper amount of time, effort and energy in, which will continue to pay dividends long into the future. Many levels of discipline. There are many levels to discipline. There is no one-size-fits-all set of features to discipline. In many cases, it requires adaptability, depending on the particular set of circumstances you're dealing with. With certain people, you need more discipline than others. In certain aspects of your life, like education, you will need a certain type of discipline, whereas you would need different levels of self-control when it comes to avoiding drugs, alcoholism or sexual addiction. This is also true when it comes to emotional self-control. Let me tell you, it's the easiest thing in the world to tell people what you're thinking. But let me tell you, that's also the easiest way to burn your bridges. If you want to become part of the solution, you have to know how to control your emotions and channel them in a productive way. All of this requires discipline. Discipline is something you do. There are many misconceptions regarding discipline. A lot of people confuse it with other personal traits. What is discipline anyway? I have given you an earlier definition, but we're going to drill deeper in this section. Discipline involves action. It really boils down to what you do and what you choose not to do. This is the most practical way to frame discipline based on how people actually perform. Discipline is the ability to do things that you'd rather avoid. These are necessary things. These are things that can take your life to the next level. These are things that can set you up for greater success in life. These are the things that would resolve a lot of personally difficult issues, but most people would rather avoid them. Let's face it, if given a choice between emotional confrontation and just letting sleeping dogs lie, most people would take the latter. That's just human nature. Discipline gives you the ability to attack these things head-on. Discipline also gives you the ability to do what you have committed to doing no matter how inconvenient or uncomfortable. If you have given your word to somebody and you have promised to do something, discipline enables you to follow through. You may not feel like it may not be all that convenient, in fact, it might even be a major hassle, but if you are a disciplined person, you will come through each and every time. How come? You have given your word. You have committed to that person. As you can well imagine, this can help build a reputation. Let's face it, most people would rather flake. Most people would get wobbly and eventually just drop out. It doesn't really matter if they have given you their word. It doesn't really matter if they made all sorts of promises. At the end of the day, it all boils down to whether they are willing to stick to their promises, regardless of how inconvenient it is, or whether they just take the path of least resistance. Which brings me to the next point. Discipline also involves the ability to stick to a course of action, even if you're busy or you don't feel like it. You would be able to stick to something that you have committed to, even if you feel like you don't have the time. Discipline also involves patience in relationships. Let's get one thing clear, the person that you're with is in your life for a reason. Of the 100 different traits that make up that person, you probably love 90 to 95 of them, but there are 5 traits that you really hate. This requires patience. Everybody is a work in progress. None of us are perfect. If you want your relationship to blossom and survive, you have to be disciplined. Finally, most people have principles, but not everybody is willing to stick to them. Not everybody is willing to sacrifice for them. When you have discipline, you find the strength to stick to principles. It may not be popular, it definitely may not be convenient, but you will stick to it anyway. This builds character. This also builds reputation, because you stick out like a sore thumb. Most people would rather abandon their principles at the most convenient or most opportune period. Few and far between are people who are willing to stick to something because of personal principle. This requires discipline. The different types of discipline. What are the different types of discipline out there, and why do these matter? Well, discipline is a broad concept that can be acted out or exercised. However, it's a good idea to classify this ability depending on certain areas of your life. There are slight differences in these types of discipline. For example, there is mental discipline. If you're a mentally disciplined person, you are able to process information in a focused way. It's very easy to slack off. It's very easy to kick the can down the road or postpone things. It's definitely very easy to procrastinate. When you're a mentally disciplined person, you can focus on tasks that you need to do as well as information that you need to process, and go all the way through. It's hard for you to get distracted. It's hard for you to take a detour and lose focus. People who are looking to learn a trade or excel in school need a tremendous amount of mental discipline to become successful. The next type of discipline is emotional discipline. This is a very practical form of discipline because every day we are going to find ourselves in certain touchy situations. Maybe somebody said something that offended you. Maybe you did something that was embarrassing. Whatever the case may be, there will always be situations where we will get on the wrong side of people. It takes quite a bit of discipline to ignore our raw emotional state and focus on doing the right thing. Sometimes, when somebody pushes you, the best way forward is to just brush it off. It would have been so much more emotionally gratifying if you were to smack that person around, but if you were to do that, you must be ready to pay the consequences of that action. Emotional discipline also involves your memories. If you're like most normal people, I'm sure there is somebody in your past that triggers or evokes strong emotions. You can't help but feel sad, enraged, or feel guilty once you start thinking about that memory. If you are a very emotionally disciplined person, you would be able to separate the thought from the emotional baggage it has. This enables you to preserve an even-handed disposition. You are more likely to make better decisions, you are more likely to preserve your relationships, you're more likely to be more optimistic about the future. Next is physical discipline. This involves day-to-day decisions and behavioral patterns involving your body. If you are overweight, you know that you have physical discipline issues. You know that you should eat less and move around more. Now, it's easy to intellectually accept these ideas, it's another matter entirely to actually carry them out. And physical discipline is really all about exercising full control and ownership of your body so you can be healthier and enjoy greater well-being. Let's face it, your physical decisions now can have a major impact on the quality of your life as well as the length of your life. Physical discipline also involves habits like smoking, drinking, or drugs. If you apply discipline to the things that you do with your body, you can increase the quality of your life outcomes. You don't have to die an early death. You don't have to develop cancer. You can decrease your chances of developing type 2 diabetes. There are just so many great practical health effects of physical discipline. Finally, there's sexual discipline. It doesn't really matter whether you're married or single. When you interact with people, there will be instances of sexual temptation. It doesn't matter whether you are in a committed relationship or not, you have to practice sexual discipline. This is especially challenging if you are single. Make no mistake, practicing sexual discipline not only has a profound impact on your health, because you get to avoid all sorts of socially transmitted diseases, but it also impacts your relationships. Because let's face it, friendships get awkward and often change for the worse when sex enters the picture. Also, in the United States and elsewhere, there is a heightened sensitivity to sexual harassment and gender relationships in the workplace and in school. So by exercising more discipline on the sexual side of your persona, you can actually prevent all sorts of unnecessary drama that can haunt you for a long, long time. Every day is an opportunity to become more disciplined. As I've mentioned in the introduction to this book, I'm going to teach you how to become more disciplined on a practical level. This book is short on theory and speculation. Instead, it's focused on taking every opportunity you have on a day-to-day basis and making the best out of them to develop discipline. Make no mistake, every single day is packed with opportunities to become more disciplined. It also begins with the moment you wake up. The moment you wake up, you can choose to press the snooze button on your alarm clock to get 10 more minutes of sleep, or you can take that opportunity to wake up. It doesn't matter if you feel good about it, it doesn't matter if you're feeling groggy, it doesn't matter whether you're suffering from some sort of brain fog. You just commit to waking up at a certain time. That is an opportunity. Similarly, you can choose to screw around in the breakfast area of your home until it's time to get into your car and head to work. Alternatively, you can take that time to run or walk around the block to get some exercise. That is an opportunity. Similarly, if you find yourself waiting, for example, you're stuck in traffic or you're waiting in a line at a bank, this is an opportunity to practice discipline. You can easily do things in a way where you waste your time, or you can do other things that will build up your personal value. For example, if you find yourself stuck in traffic and you're a carpool passenger, you may want to build up your intellectual capabilities and value by whipping out a book or listening to audiobooks, or you can play video games. Do you see how this works? Also, when you come across people and you make a promise, sticking to that decision is an opportunity to build discipline. Sure, you're busy and there are just so many other things that you could be doing. You'd be easily forgiven for just blowing off whatever commitments you've made. But if you took the opportunity to stick to a decision, your reputation improves. Let's face it, there are a lot of flakes out there. There are a lot of people that are not all that trustworthy. And if you are that person who people can say is reliable, your reputation improves. Chances are, people would entrust you with more responsibility. Chances are, people would seek you out if they need some sort of advice. Another daily opportunity simply involves showing up on time. If you are the type of person who shows up 15 minutes early to any appointment or to your work, this highlights your character. You're a very professional person. Your word is your bond. People can rely on you. This also means that you come prepared. Finally, if you come across unpleasant people, maybe somebody cussed at you when you were trying to park your car or your boss is being mean to you, these unpleasant and uncomfortable situations can be golden opportunities to build your discipline. It's very easy to just honk your horn at the other guy and cuss back at him. It's very easy to play a passive-aggressive game with your boss. But if you were to avoid the quick and easy and focus instead on the hard and necessary, you may be setting yourself up for greater success later on. Key mindsets to adopt to become more disciplined. I wish I can tell you that becoming more disciplined is just a simple matter of deciding to be disciplined. It would be so easy if that were the case. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. You may have certain mindsets that you may not be aware of that can get in the way of you becoming a more disciplined person. That's right. You might be sabotaging yourself because you hang on to certain ideas, assumptions, or expectations that can undermine your progress towards greater levels of self-discipline. You need to adopt the following mindsets so they can either counteract whatever negative mindsets you have or they can turbocharge your ability to develop discipline. Discipline is like a mental muscle. Please understand that for your personal level of self-discipline to increase, you have to challenge it. You can't just say, "I'm going to be a more disciplined person," and refuse to put it into action. That's not going to work, not in a million years. You have to stress your level of discipline. For example, if you're having a tough time showing up to work on time, you can't just slide back and say, "Well, it's not going to happen." You're not exercising your disciplined mental muscles when you do that. Instead, you try again and again to show up on time. Once you're able to do that, you step it up by trying to show up 5 minutes ahead of time, then 10 minutes, then 15 minutes. The more you stress or put pressure on your ability to act in a disciplined way, the stronger it becomes. The worst thing that you can do is to fail to challenge whatever discipline you already have. The more I run away from difficult things, the weaker my discipline becomes. You have to adopt this mindset. You have to understand that when you react to your world out of fear, you become a less disciplined person. In many cases, you don't even develop discipline in the first place. You have to understand that there are a lot of scary things in life. There are a lot of things that you'd rather not deal with. However, that's what makes life so interesting. You have to lose your fear. You have to stop viewing these things as inconveniences, hassles, or things I hate to do. Instead, you should turn around and embrace them. Sure, they are very inconvenient. Sometimes, they're downright uncomfortable, but guess what? The more you do them, the more you get used to them. Most importantly, the more you do them, the more you're able to connect the dots and you're able to do more of them. That's how you become more efficient. That's how you become a more effective person. Unfortunately, if you make it a habit to continuously give in to quitting, the weaker you become. You have to understand that in this life, you're going to be facing different challenges. If your number one instinct is to turn around and quit, you become a weaker person. Eventually, don't be surprised if it doesn't take much for you to want to quit. This is why you have to turn things around. You have to make this process go in the other direction. In other words, it would take harder and harsher circumstances for you to take a step back. That's the direction you should go, because when you do that, you increase your levels of discipline, but you also maximize your levels of personal confidence and competence. When most people would rather deal with a problem by just giving up or kicking the can down the road, you stand out like a hero when you're the only person looking to tackle that problem. Please understand that this applies across the board. I'm not just talking about issues that you face at work or at school. This can also involve your relationships. The more I do things, the better I get at them. It may not seem like it at this point in time, but you're actually building up competence the more you do something. Seriously. For example, if you make it a habit to walk around your block every single day, I can guarantee you that you're probably seeing different ways to make your daily routine more pleasant. You're probably seeing different details that you can benefit from. Simple repetition gives you all sorts of opportunities to do a better job. Again, this applies across the board. This is due to the fact that the more you do something, the less intimidated you become. Do you remember the first time you rode a bicycle? Chances are you bruised or scraped your knee constantly. After all, you were learning. However, after a certain point, you mastered your bike riding skills, and it will take quite a bit of a hit for you to get thrown off your bike. You probably went through this process without looking at the big picture. It was just something thought you had to do. Well, assume that same attitude when it comes to the big things in life that are stressing you out. Apply the same attitude to the things that you would rather quit on. Another fact that you can take comfort in is the reality that the more you do something, the more routine it becomes. The reason people fail with certain tasks is because they're intimidated by them. They think that it's going to be too hard, that it will take too much time, or it's just too hard to figure out. However, the more you do something, regardless of how many times you fail, you take a lot of the emotional intimidation out. It becomes familiar, and, once it starts to become routine, you start breaking things down, and guess what? You start succeeding more often than your failures. Eventually, you reach a point where you basically get those results that you're looking for time after time. This really all boils down to the ability to connect the dots and see patterns. Unfortunately, you're not going to get there if your number one instinct is to give up. Adopt the mindset of the more I do things, the better I get at them, and you will become a more competent person in many areas of your life. Competence produces confidence. In U.S. educational institutions and school districts, the idea of self-esteem as the gateway to confidence has been the received institutional wisdom for several decades now. The idea is if you make kids feel good about themselves, eventually, they will become more competent. Eventually, they will be able to figure things out and achieve. Well, it turns out that it's actually the other way around. According to research studies in the 1990s, when children become competent in something or anything, they become more confident. When they're more confident, they experiment more and they try harder and they increase their levels of competence. It turns out that competence produces confidence, which enables people to develop even higher levels of competence. Confidence does not flow from self-esteem. Instead, self-esteem flows from competence. Understand how this works. Adopt this mindset. Let's face it. You may not be all that confident about certain things in your life right now. However, the more you master them, the more competent you become. You will then feel more confident to tackle more things and go out on a limb on many areas of your life. The more confident you become, the more you try, and the more competent you build. This leads to even more confidence, so on and so forth. You just need to start somewhere, and this means doing. You may think that you would do a lousy job today, but that's okay. You have to start somewhere. The good news is as long as you choose to put in the work to become competent, the confidence will follow. Momentum is on my side. Believe that moment is on your side. If you believe this, you will eventually reach a point where it becomes harder and harder for you to stop than to start. I know this sounds crazy at this point. At this point, you're probably having a tough time staying from foods that you know are bad for you and sticking to foods that don't taste all that good. The good news is the more you stick to it, the easier it becomes over time. In fact, you could reach a point of momentum where it becomes harder to stop your behavior than to start. All it takes is to keep trying and to keep on pushing. When this becomes your routine, this action changes the way you look at things and the way you feel about things. This eventually becomes part of your identity. Build discipline using the things you're already doing. As I mentioned in the introduction of this book, what makes this book different is that you're going to choose to build discipline doing the things that you're already doing. You're not going to be assuming weird yoga poses. You're not going to adopt exotic meditation or mindfulness practices. You're not going to be doing any of that. Instead, you're just going to look at what you currently do and build discipline doing those things. This may seem small. In many cases, they may even seem trivial. However, just as small streams combine to produce big rivers, all these small tasks, when practiced routinely and mindfully pursued, can lead to increasing levels of personal discipline over time. Meet deadlines. If you work, chances are you are dealing with deadlines already. There's also a high likelihood that you probably have blown through a deadline or two in your career. You can build discipline by making it a point to meet deadlines every single time. I understand this can seem like a tall order right now. However, the more you commit to this, and the more you achieve it, the easier it becomes. You just have to consciously commit to doing it and understand what's at stake. It is not just a matter of getting stuff done by a certain point in time so your boss would be happy. Instead, it's all about practicing discipline in a very practical way that you can repeat over and over again. Simply commit to meeting them more often and make it a point to put in the effort to meet your deadlines each and every time. I understand this is probably not going to happen the first time you do it. That's okay. However, the more you try, the easier it becomes until, eventually, you don't even notice, because it's become part of your routine. Put in the work. I know this seems kind of obvious. After all, if you have a job, it is easy for you to automatically think that you're already working. What if I told you that typical employees' 8 hours can actually be condensed into one productive hour of work? I know it's quite shocking, but it's absolutely true. Just pay attention to what you yourself are personally doing. Do you work all 8 hours when you are at your job? Chances are you don't. Chances are you spend a lot of time on the phone, checking email, checking social media updates, shuffling paperwork, reading unrelated stuff, talking about unrelated stuffy, and other activities. All these add up to quite a bit of time. When you just zero in on the stuff that actually matters, as far as your employer is concerned, you'd be lucky to get 1 hour of actual work done. Use this as a golden opportunity. Put in the work. Commit to more output. I'm not just talking about random output here. I'm talking about output that actually contributes a tremendous amount of value to your employer. Next, you should commit to pure work. In other words, cut down on the social media updates. Set aside the email time. Restrict unrelated activities to a bare minimum. If that isn't challenging enough, you should also commit to hitting quality guidelines. It's not enough that you are producing work at the right amount. You should also make sure that whatever work you produce meets the highest quality standard. Let me tell you, you would always have this opportunity if you work for other people for a living. Every single hour you are at your job is an opportunity to do this. The good news is if you consciously work to build up your discipline by committing to hitting high-quality guidelines and producing a lot more output, you stand to benefit in more immediate terms. Not only does committing to more productive work help you become a more disciplined person, but it can actually help you get promoted more. It can also help you to get paid more. Stick to regular meal schedules. Believe it or not, even the simple act of eating can build discipline. How? Well, if you're like most people, you probably have shifting schedules as far as your meals go. Sometimes you get so busy in the morning that you skip a meal. Sometimes things pop in the middle of the day and you have lunch at weird hours. By deciding to stick to regular meal schedules, you actually build up your personal discipline level. The secret here is not just setting up a schedule. The secret is setting up the consequences of missing your schedule. I am, of course, talking about refusing to eat if you miss your scheduled meal time. If you set things up this way, then there is a consequence to your action. This sets you up for meeting your regular meal schedules because you have an incentive to do so. This goes a long way in pushing you to eat at regular times during the day. Your mind becomes more disciplined and, most importantly, your body becomes more disciplined. Don't be surprised if you regulate your weight more effectively just by simply sticking to regular meal schedules and refusing to eat if you miss your meal times. Give yourself consequences. The big challenge in building personal discipline is the fact that a lot of people look at this whole project as something that would be nice if it happened. In other words, they're setting it up as an option. It is not an option. You're actually engaged in the most important things you could ever do with your life. Like I described in an earlier chapter, it has a profound impact in many areas of your life. It also applies across the board. Unfortunately, if you were to view this as something that would be nice if it happened, you don't really set up any negative consequences for yourself. If you don't show up to work on time, that's just another blown schedule. If you don't eat a meal on time, welcome to the club. You have to get out of those mindsets. You have to instead give yourself consequences if you drop the ball. For example, if you did not stick to your regular meal schedules, you skip your meal. If you spend money in an unscheduled way, you reduce your budget. There has to be some sort of negative consequence for your failure to act in a disciplined way. Unfortunately, nobody is going to step in and do this for you. You're going to have to do this yourself. Remember, baby steps are still steps forward. I know that the steps above can be a tall order for most people. Believe me, I understand. This is why you shouldn't beat yourself up too badly if you stumble and fail. Keep in mind that even if you're just making small steps forward and you're able to get things done from time to time, you're still making progress. After all, baby steps are still steps forward. At the very least, you're getting adjusted to the idea that you have to behave in a more disciplined way. You only need to compare your mindset now with what it was before for you to see that this is a good thing. So, don't worry too much about any big improvements that you may have failed to achieve. Focus instead on the fact that you're making small changes. No matter their size, if you keep repeating them and you keep pushing, they can eventually take you to where you want to go.